The cards hit the table with a sound that sealed Clara Meredith's fate, and she knew before her father even stumbled through the door that night that everything had changed forever. The summer of 1881 in Dodge City, Kansas, brought more than scorching heat and dust storms. It brought ruin to the Meredith household in the form of Samuel Meredith's gambling addiction. Clara had watched her father descend deeper into his vice over the past 2 years, ever since her mother died of consumption. The farm they once owned was gone, sold piece by piece to cover debts. Now they lived in a cramped room above the general store, and Clara worked herself to exhaustion taking in laundry and mending clothes to keep them fed. She was 22 years old, with chestnut hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and green eyes that held more worry than any young woman should carry. Her hands were rough from work, her dresses worn and patched, but she held her head high and maintained her dignity despite their circumstances. She had long ago accepted that marriage was unlikely for her. No respectable man wanted a wife with a drunkard father and no dowry. She had made peace with a life of hard work and solitude. But that night, when her father came home with wild eyes and trembling hands, Clara learned that fate had something far worse in store than spinsterhood. "Clara," Samuel said, his voice cracking. He would not meet her eyes. "Clara, I have to tell you something." She set down the shirt she was mending and felt her stomach drop. She had seen her father ashamed before, but never like this, never with such complete devastation written across his weathered face. "What have you done?" she asked quietly. Samuel sank onto the rickety chair by the table and put his head in his hands. "I thought I could win it back. I thought just one more game and I could pay off everything. We could start fresh, maybe even get a little house again." "How much do you owe?" $3,000. The number hit Clara like a physical blow. $3,000 might as well have been $3 million. There was no possible way they could ever repay such a sum. Samuel barely made enough doing odd jobs around town to contribute to their rent and food. To whom? Clara's voice was steady despite the fear rising in her chest. "Jack Thornton." Clara's blood ran cold. Jack Thornton owned the largest saloon in Dodge City, along with several other businesses of questionable reputation. He was known to be ruthless with those who crossed him. Men who owed Thornton money and could not pay often disappeared or turned up badly beaten in alleys. "Papa, what are we going to do?" Samuel finally looked up at her, and Clara saw tears streaming down his face. "He gave me 2 choices. Either he takes everything we have, including this room, and I work for him for free for the rest of my life, or what? Or I give him you. He says he can sell you to one of the mining camps up north. The men there pay good money for women. He says you would cover the debt and then some." Clara could not breathe. She could not think. The room seemed to tilt around her. "You cannot be serious. You cannot be telling me that you would sell your own daughter into slavery." "It is not slavery exactly. More like an arrangement. You would be married off to whoever pays." "It is legal in some territories. Thornton has connections." "It is slavery," Clara said, her voice rising. "It is selling a human being, your daughter, your own flesh and blood." "I know," Samuel shouted, then lowered his voice. "I know, but what choice do I have? If I refuse, he will kill me." He made that very clear. "And then what happens to you? You would be alone with no one to protect you. At least this way you would have a husband, a home, even if it is not what you would have chosen." Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "When?" "Tomorrow night. There is an auction at the saloon. Private, just for men with money. Thornton says you will fetch a high price because you are young and pretty and unspoiled." The words made Clara want to vomit. An auction. She would be displayed like livestock and sold to the highest bidder. She thought of the rough miners she had seen passing through town, crude men who smelled of sweat and whiskey and looked at women like they were objects to be used and discarded. "I will not do it," she said. "You have to. If you run, Thornton will find you. And he will make you wish you had cooperated. Please, Clara, I am so sorry. I am so terribly sorry, but there is no other way." Clara looked at her father, this weak man who had gambled away everything, who was now gambling away her very life, and felt a complex surge of emotions. Anger, betrayal, grief, but also pity. He was broken, destroyed by his own weakness. Hating him would not change what was about to happen. She did not sleep that night. She lay on her thin mattress and stared at the ceiling, trying to imagine what her future would hold. Would the man who bought her be cruel? Would he beat her? Would she be expected to submit to him immediately, or would there be some pretense of courtship first? She thought about running, but Thornton had men everywhere. She would not make it out of Dodge City. By morning, she had made a decision. She would endure whatever came. She would survive. And somehow, someday, she would find a way to be free. The day passed in a blur. Clara went through the motions of her work, washing and mending, speaking to no one about what awaited her. When evening came, her father escorted her to Thornton's saloon. The main room was closed to regular customers. Inside, about 15 men sat at tables, drinking and talking in low voices. They looked up when Clara entered, and she felt their eyes crawl over her like insects. Jack Thornton was a large man with slicked-back dark hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He approached Clara and her father with the easy confidence of someone who always got what he wanted. "Miss Meredith," he said, taking her hand and kissing it in a mockery of gentlemanly behavior. "You look lovely this evening. The gentlemen here are very eager to meet you." Clara said nothing. She stood straight and kept her expression neutral, refusing to show fear. Thornton led her to a small platform at the front of the room. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming to this exclusive event. As you know, I occasionally have the opportunity to facilitate arrangements between men of means and young women seeking new opportunities in life. Tonight, I present Miss Clara Meredith. She is 22 years old, healthy, well-mannered, and as you can see, quite attractive. She can read and write, and she is skilled in all the domestic arts. The bidding will start at $1,000. Clara felt herself trembling but forced herself to remain still. She looked out at the faces of the men, trying to gauge who might be the least terrible option. Most of them were older, 40 or 50 at least, with hard faces and calculating eyes. A few were younger but no less intimidating. 1,000, called a man in the back. 1,500, said another. 2,000, bid a heavy-set man with a thick beard and cold blue eyes. Clara felt her heart sink. He looked cruel. 2,500, came a voice from the side of the room. Clara turned to look and saw a man she had not noticed before. He was younger than most of the others, perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and light brown hair that fell across his forehead. He wore dusty traveling clothes and had a quiet, serious expression. His eyes met hers, and she saw something in them that was different from the others. Not hunger or calculation, but something almost like concern. 3,000, the heavy-set man countered, a note of irritation in his voice. The younger man hesitated, and Clara felt a strange desperation rise in her chest. Of all the men in the room, he seemed the least frightening. "Please," she thought, "please keep bidding." 3,500, the younger man said firmly. The heavy-set man glared at him. 4,000. A murmur went through the room. 4,000 was an enormous sum, more than Thornton had expected. Clara could see the satisfaction on the saloon owner's face. The younger man was silent for a long moment. Clara watched him, silently begging. Finally, he spoke. $5,000. The room went quiet. The heavy-set man cursed under his breath but did not bid higher. Thornton looked around the room expectantly. Any other bids? 5,000 going once, going twice, sold to Mr. Caleb Rourke. Clara felt dizzy with relief and terror. She had been sold to a stranger for $5,000. She did not even know if she should be grateful that it was the younger man and not one of the others. Thornton gestured for Caleb Rourke to approach. The young man stood and walked to the platform with a slight limp. Clara noticed he favored his right leg. He handed Thornton a thick envelope, which the saloon owner quickly counted. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Rourke," Thornton said. "The girl is yours. I have a marriage certificate here that you can sign to make it all legal and proper." Caleb took the paper and glanced at it, then looked at Clara. "Is this what you want?" he asked quietly. The question startled her. No one had asked what she wanted. "I do not have a choice," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He studied her face for a moment, then turned to Thornton. "I need to speak with her privately first." Thornton frowned. "That is not necessary. You have paid for her, and the certificate just makes it official. Nevertheless, I would like a few minutes alone with Miss Meredith." Something in Caleb's tone made it clear this was not a request. Thornton shrugged and gestured to a back room. "Make it quick." Caleb led Clara to the small room, which appeared to be an office of some kind. He closed the door and turned to face her. Up close, she could see that his eyes were hazel, flecked with gold. There was a scar along his jawline, and his hands were calloused from hard work. "My name is Caleb Rourke," he said. "I own a ranch about 30 miles north of here. I came to Dodge City to sell cattle and heard about this auction. I want you to understand something, Miss Meredith. I did not come here looking for a wife. I came because I have a sister, and if she were ever in a situation like this, I would hope someone would help her." Clara stared at him, not understanding. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I am giving you a choice. I can sign this marriage certificate, and you can come with me to my ranch. You would have your own room, and I would expect nothing from you except perhaps some help with cooking and housekeeping if you are willing. You would be free to leave whenever you want. Or if you prefer, I can give you money to go wherever you would like, and you can start a new life somewhere else. But if you leave tonight without me, Thornton will just sell you to someone else. The heavy-set man who was bidding against me is named Dutch Keller, and he has a reputation for being very cruel to women." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Why would you do this? You do not even know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Caleb said simply. "And because no person should be sold like property. What is happening here is wrong, and I cannot stop all of it, but I can help you. If I come with you, you truly expect nothing from me, no wifely duties, nothing you do not freely choose to give. I would marry you in name only to protect you. That is all." Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She had been prepared to endure a nightmare, and instead, this stranger was offering her a lifeline. It seemed too good to be true, but what choice did she have? Even if he was lying, even if his intentions were not as pure as he claimed, he could not possibly be worse than Dutch Keller. "I will come with you," she said. Caleb nodded and picked up the marriage certificate. He signed his name at the bottom, then handed the pen to Clara. Her hand shook as she added her signature. In an instant, she became Clara Rourke, wife of a man she had met 5 minutes ago. They left the back room and found Thornton waiting with Samuel. Clara's father looked at her with desperate, pleading eyes, but she could not bring herself to say goodbye to him. He had sold her. Whatever love she had felt for him was buried under the weight of that betrayal. Caleb handed the signed certificate to Thornton, who examined it and nodded. "Congratulations on your marriage. I wish you both every happiness." The mockery in his tone was clear, but Caleb ignored it. He turned to Clara and said, "Do you have any belongings you need to collect? Just a few things in the room where I was living. We will get them now." They walked through the darkening streets of Dodge City in silence. Clara was acutely aware of the man beside her, this stranger who was now legally her husband. She snuck glances at him, trying to understand who he was and what he really wanted from her. His face gave little away. He seemed tired and perhaps a bit sad. At the general store, they climbed the stairs to the small room Clara had shared with her father. She gathered her few possessions, everything she owned fitting into a single worn carpet bag. A few dresses, some undergarments, her mother's Bible, and a small tin of buttons and thread. It was a pathetic collection, the sum total of her life. Caleb waited by the door, not intruding on her space. When she was finished, he took the bag from her and said, "My wagon is at the livery stable. We can stay at the hotel tonight and leave first thing in the morning. I have already paid for 2 rooms. 2 rooms. Clara felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. He really did intend to keep his word. The hotel was modest but clean, far nicer than anywhere Clara had stayed in the past 2 years. Caleb escorted her to her room and handed her the key. "Lock the door," he said. "If you need anything, I am right next door. We will leave at dawn." "Mr. Rourke," Clara said as he turned to go. "Thank you. I do not know why you did what you did tonight, but I am grateful." He looked back at her, and for the first time she saw a hint of a smile. "Call me Caleb, and you are welcome, Clara. Get some rest." Clara locked the door behind him and sat on the edge of the bed. Her mind was reeling from everything that had happened. This morning she had been Clara Meredith, daughter of a gambling addict, poor and desperate but at least in control of her own life. Tonight she was Clara Rourke, wife of a stranger, bought and paid for like a horse or a piece of furniture. And yet, against all odds, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Caleb Rourke had shown her kindness when he had no obligation to do so. Perhaps her new life would not be the nightmare she had feared. She lay down on the soft mattress and closed her eyes, but sleep did not come easily. She kept thinking about the ranch that was now to be her home, and about the man who had bought her freedom with his name and his money. Who was Caleb Rourke? What had brought him to that auction? And could she trust him, or was this just a different kind of trap? She would find out soon enough. Dawn broke clear and cool, and Clara was already awake and dressed when Caleb knocked on her door. They ate a quick breakfast of eggs and bread in the hotel dining room, speaking little. Caleb seemed preoccupied, his gaze distant. Clara wondered what he was thinking but did not ask. The wagon was loaded and ready when they arrived at the livery stable. It was a sturdy farm wagon pulled by 2 strong horses. In the back were supplies Caleb had purchased for the ranch: sacks of flour and sugar, tools, a new saddle, and various other items. He helped Clara onto the bench seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they drove out of Dodge City, Clara looked back once at the town that had been her home. She felt no sadness at leaving it behind. There was nothing for her there now except painful memories. The journey to the ranch took most of the day. The Kansas landscape rolled by in waves of golden grassland, broken occasionally by stands of cottonwood trees along creek beds. The sky was vast and blue, and the heat of the summer sun bore down on them relentlessly. Caleb pointed out landmarks as they traveled. A distinctive rock formation, the ruins of an old homestead, a place where the creek ran deep enough to water livestock even in drought. Clara listened and watched, trying to orient herself in this new world. She had spent most of her life in town. The openness of the prairie was both beautiful and intimidating. Around midday, Caleb stopped the wagon near a creek so the horses could drink and rest. He handed Clara a canteen and some dried meat and biscuits. They sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, and Clara worked up the courage to ask the questions that had been building inside her. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked. Caleb chewed thoughtfully before answering. "About 5 years. I worked on other ranches for a long time, saved every penny I could, and finally had enough to buy my own land and some cattle. It is not a big operation, just me and a couple of hired hands during busy seasons, but it is mine." "You said you have a sister." "Had. Emma died 3 years ago. She was married to a man who turned out to be cruel. By the time I found out what was happening and tried to help her, it was too late. She took sick, and the doctor said her body was too weakened from the beatings to fight the illness. She was only 24. Clara felt a pang of sympathy. "I am so sorry." Caleb nodded, his jaw tight. "That is why I could not just walk away when I heard about the auction. I kept thinking about Emma, about how different things might have been if someone had helped her sooner. I cannot bring her back, but I can try to prevent another woman from suffering the same fate." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of shared grief hanging between them. Finally, Clara said, "What happened to your leg? I noticed you limp a bit. Horse fell on me a few years back. Broke my leg in 2 places. It healed well enough, but it aches sometimes, especially when the weather is about to change. That must have been terrible. It was not pleasant, but I have known men who have suffered worse and recovered. I was lucky." They continued their journey, and as the afternoon wore on, Clara began to see signs of human habitation. Fenced pastures, grazing cattle, and finally, in the distance, a house and barn. As they drew closer, Clara could see that the house was a simple wooden structure, painted white but weathered by sun and wind. It had a covered porch across the front and a stone chimney on one side. The barn was larger and appeared to be in good repair. Beyond it were several outbuildings and a corral where a few horses stood. "Welcome home," Caleb said as he pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Home. The word felt strange to Clara. She had not had a real home in so long. She climbed down from the wagon and looked around, taking it all in. The property was isolated with no other houses in sight, but it felt peaceful rather than lonely. The wind whispered through the grass, and somewhere a meadowlark sang. Caleb unloaded her carpetbag and led her into the house. The interior was neat but sparse. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a wood stove, a table and chairs, and a couple of worn armchairs near the fireplace. A door led to what appeared to be Caleb's bedroom, and a ladder in the corner led to a loft space. "You can have the bedroom," Caleb said. "I will sleep in the loft. It is more comfortable than it looks." "I cannot take your bedroom," Clara protested. "Yes, you can, I insist. You will have privacy this way and your own space." Clara did not argue further. She was too tired and overwhelmed to debate. She took her bag into the bedroom and found it simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a small table with a wash basin. The bed was covered with a handmade quilt in shades of blue and green. It looked like something Emma might have made. When she returned to the main room, Caleb was starting a fire in the stove. "I will make us some supper," he said. "Nothing fancy, just beans and bacon. Tomorrow you can explore and get your bearings. If you want to help with the housework and cooking, I would appreciate it, but you do not have to." "You can do whatever you like." "I want to help," Clara said. "I need to feel useful, and it is the least I can do to repay your kindness." "You do not owe me anything," Caleb said firmly. "I did not do this so you would be indebted to me. I did it because it was right." They ate their simple meal in companionable silence, and afterward, Clara insisted on washing the dishes. As darkness fell, Caleb lit a lamp and said, "I usually turn in early. Ranch work starts at dawn." "I am tired too," Clara admitted. "It has been quite a day." "Quite a day," Caleb agreed. He hesitated, then added, "Clara, I meant what I said. You are safe here. You can trust me." "I believe you," Clara said, and realized that she did. There was something fundamentally decent about Caleb Rourke, something solid and trustworthy. She did not know him well, but her instincts told her he was a good man. That night, lying in the comfortable bed in her own room, Clara felt the tension of the past few days begin to ease. She was still uncertain about the future, still processing the fact that she was married to a stranger, but she was no longer afraid. She had been given an unexpected gift, a second chance. She fell asleep to the sound of coyotes howling in the distance, a wild and lonely sound that somehow felt like a lullaby. The days that followed settled into a routine. Clara woke early and prepared breakfast while Caleb did the morning chores, feeding the animals, checking fences, and tending to whatever needed attention around the ranch. After breakfast, Clara cleaned the house and did laundry, tasks she had done for years but which felt different now. She was not working to earn pennies to keep a roof over her head. She was taking care of a home that was, in a strange way, hers. Caleb was gone most of each day, working on the ranch. When he came in for the midday meal, he was always polite and respectful, thanking her for the food and asking if she needed anything. He never invaded her space or made her feel uncomfortable. True to his word, he slept in the loft and treated her like a guest rather than a wife. At first, Clara appreciated the distance between them. It allowed her to adjust to her new life without pressure. But as the weeks passed, she found herself growing curious about Caleb. He was a quiet man, not given to long conversations, but in his silence there was a kind of strength. She noticed the way he was gentle with the horses, patient with the cattle, and careful in his work. She saw how he read in the evenings by lamplight, usually books about ranching or history. She learned that he had been orphaned young and raised by an uncle who worked on a ranch in Texas. He had come to Kansas to make his own way, bringing Emma with him, hoping to build a better life for both of them. Clara began to share her own story in small pieces. She told him about her mother, a kind woman who had loved books and music and had tried to give Clara an education despite their poverty. She told him about watching her father change after her mother's death, how the grief had driven him to whiskey and cards. She did not talk about the night of the auction. That was still too raw, too painful. One evening, about a month after Clara had arrived at the ranch, a summer storm rolled in. The sky darkened to bruised purple and lightning split the horizon. Thunder rumbled like distant artillery. Caleb hurried to get the animals secured, and Clara closed all the windows and lit the lamps. The storm hit with fury, rain pounding on the roof and wind howling around the corners of the house. Clara stood at the window, watching the display of nature's power, and felt a thrill of exhilaration mixed with fear. She had always loved storms, the way they made her feel small and connected to something vast and elemental. Caleb came in soaked to the skin, his hair plastered to his forehead. Clara handed him a towel and said, "You should change before you catch cold." He nodded and climbed to the loft, returning a few minutes later in dry clothes. Clara had made coffee and they sat at the table, listening to the storm rage outside. "Does it frighten you?" Caleb asked. "Living out here so far from town," Clara considered the question. "No, I think I like it. In town I always felt watched, judged. Here I feel free." "I am glad," Caleb said. "I worried that you might find it too isolated, too lonely." "Are you lonely?" Clara asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Caleb looked at her, his hazel eyes thoughtful. "I was, before you came. I did not realize how much until you were here. It is nice to have someone to talk to, someone to share meals with." "I feel the same way," Clara admitted. "I thought I would miss town, but I do not. Everything I need is here." The storm continued through the night, and neither of them wanted to go to bed. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams, learning about each other in the flickering lamplight. Clara learned that Caleb wanted to expand his ranch, to breed horses as well as raise cattle. He spoke with passion about the land, about building something lasting. Clara told him that she had once dreamed of being a teacher, that she loved children and wanted to make a difference in their lives. "You could still do that," Caleb said. "There is talk of starting a school in the area. Families are moving in and they need someone to teach their children." "Do you really think so?" "I do. You are smart and patient. You would be a wonderful teacher." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. It had been so long since anyone had believed in her, had seen potential in her rather than just another mouth to feed or a burden to bear. When the storm finally passed, and the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, they both realized they had talked the entire night away. Caleb smiled, a rare and genuine expression that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "I cannot remember the last time I stayed up all night," he said. "Neither can I," Clara replied, smiling back, "but I am glad we did." Something shifted between them that night. The careful distance they had maintained began to close. They were still cautious, still respectful of boundaries, but there was a new ease in their interactions, a growing friendship that felt like the foundation of something more. As summer turned to autumn, Clara found herself thinking about Caleb more and more. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the strength in his hands, the sound of his voice when he sang while working. She caught herself watching him from the window as he worked with the horses, admiring the easy grace of his movements despite his limp. She looked forward to their evenings together, to the conversations that ranged from practical matters to philosophy and dreams. She was falling in love with him. She realized one crisp October morning as she watched him ride in from checking the cattle. The realization should have frightened her. Their marriage was supposed to be in name only, a practical arrangement to save her from a terrible fate. But instead of fear, she felt hope. Because she had begun to suspect that Caleb might be falling in love with her too. She saw it in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, a softness in his gaze that had not been there before. She heard it in the way he said her name, with a gentleness that made her heart flutter. She felt it in the small gestures, the wildflowers he brought her from the prairie, the way he made sure she had the most comfortable chair by the fire, the concern in his voice when she mentioned feeling tired. But neither of them spoke of it. The agreement they had made was clear. She was free, no obligations, no expectations. To admit feelings would be to complicate everything, so they continued in their careful dance, circling closer but never quite touching. The turning point came in late October. A neighboring rancher, an older man named Henry Davis, stopped by to discuss buying some cattle from Caleb. Clara served them coffee and pie, and Davis made pleasant conversation. But as he was leaving, he said something that made Clara's blood run cold. "Ran into Jack Thornton in Dodge City last week," Davis said casually. "He was asking about you too, wondering how married life was treating you, seemed mighty interested in whether the little lady was happy." After Davis left, Caleb's face was grim. "Thornton has no business asking about you. You are my wife, and he has no claim on you." "Why would he be asking about me?" Clara asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Because men like Thornton do not like it when things do not go their way. He made a lot of money off you, but I suspect he is not happy that I took you out of his reach. He probably had plans to use you for his own purposes after whoever bought you grew tired of you." "What kind of plans?" Caleb hesitated, then said bluntly. "His saloon has rooms upstairs where women work. Not all of them chose that life. Thornton is not above using coercion." Clara felt sick. She had escaped one nightmare only to learn that an even worse one had been waiting in the wings. "Do you think he would try to take me back?" "Not while I am alive," Caleb said fiercely. "You are under my protection, Clara, legally and in every other way. Thornton can ask all the questions he wants, but he cannot touch you." The intensity in Caleb's voice made Clara look at him closely. She saw the determination in his face, the protective fury in his eyes, and realized that this was not just about honor or duty. Caleb cared about her deeply. "Caleb," she said softly, "why did you really buy me that night? You said it was because of your sister, and I believe that is part of it, but I think there is more to it than that." Caleb looked away, his jaw working. For a long moment he did not speak. Then he said, "When I saw you standing on that platform, looking so brave even though you were terrified, something in me just knew. I cannot explain it. I just knew that I could not let anyone else have you. I told myself it was about doing the right thing, about saving you from men like Dutch Keller, and that was true. But it was also because I wanted you safe. I wanted you with me. Even though you did not know me, even though I did not know you. And now that I do know you, now that I have spent these months with you, I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Clara's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" Caleb turned back to her, and the vulnerability in his face took her breath away. "I am saying that I have fallen in love with you, Clara. I know that was not part of our agreement. I know I promised you freedom and no obligations. But I cannot keep pretending that I do not feel what I feel. You do not have to feel the same way, nothing has to change. But I needed you to know the truth." Clara crossed the room to him, her eyes bright with tears. "I do feel the same way. I have been in love with you for weeks, maybe longer. I was just too afraid to say anything, too afraid of breaking the fragile peace we had built." Caleb reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. "You are sure? I do not want you to feel obligated." "I have never been more sure of anything," Clara whispered. "You saved me, Caleb, not just from that auction but from a life without hope. You showed me kindness and respect when I had every reason to expect cruelty. You gave me a home, a purpose, and now you are telling me you love me. How could I not love you in return?" Caleb bent his head and kissed her, a gentle, tentative kiss that quickly deepened as Clara responded. It was her first kiss, and it was everything she had imagined and more. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "I want this to be a real marriage," Caleb said. "If that is what you want too." "It is," Clara said. "It is exactly what I want." That night, their marriage became real in every sense. Caleb was gentle and patient, treating Clara with a reverence that made her feel cherished. Afterward, lying in his arms in the bed they now shared, Clara felt a happiness she had never known was possible. She had been sold like property, married to a stranger and thrust into an uncertain future. But somehow, miraculously, she had found love. The months that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. She and Caleb were inseparable, partners in every aspect of running the ranch. Clara took over more of the household duties and began helping Caleb with the lighter ranch work, feeding chickens, gathering eggs, tending the vegetable garden she had planted. She loved the physical work, the way it made her feel strong and capable. In the spring, Clara learned she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with joy and a little fear. Caleb worried about Clara's health and insisted she take it easy, though Clara laughed at his overprotectiveness. She felt wonderful, stronger than she had ever felt. As her belly grew, Caleb became even more attentive. He built a cradle for the baby and made plans to add on to the house so they would have more room. He talked about the future with an enthusiasm Clara found endearing, teaching their child to ride, expanding the ranch so there would be a good inheritance, maybe buying land for a proper town school. One afternoon in early summer, Clara was hanging laundry when she saw a rider approaching the ranch. As he drew closer, her heart sank. It was one of Jack Thornton's men, recognizable by the distinctive black horse and silver-studded saddle. Clara called for Caleb, who came quickly from the barn. He positioned himself between Clara and the approaching rider, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. The man reined in his horse and tipped his hat mockingly. "Mr. and Mrs. Rourke, lovely day. What do you want?" Caleb asked coldly. "Mr. Thornton sent me with a message. He says he has concerns about Mrs. Rourke's well-being. He heard rumors that she is not happy in her current situation and wants to offer her a way out." "Clara is happy and she is staying right here," Caleb said. "You can tell Thornton that if he sends anyone to this ranch again, I will consider it a threat and respond accordingly." The man smirked. Big words from a cripple. Thornton just wants to make sure the lady knows she has options. If she wants to leave, he can arrange transportation and employment for her back in Dodge City. "I am not going anywhere," Clara said, stepping forward despite Caleb's protective stance. "I am happy here with my husband. Tell Mr. Thornton to leave us alone." The man's eyes traveled to Clara's swollen belly and his smirk widened. Well, looks like Rourke has been getting his money's worth. Thornton will be interested to hear that." Caleb's hand moved to his gun. "Get off my property. Now." The man held up his hands in mock surrender. "I am going, but Thornton does not give up easy. He thinks you stole something that belonged to him. Do not be surprised if he comes to collect." The man rode off and Caleb immediately turned to Clara. "Pack a bag. I am taking you to the Davis Ranch. You will be safe there while I deal with this." "I am not leaving you," Clara protested. "Clara, please. I need to know you are safe. If Thornton comes here, there could be trouble. I cannot focus on protecting the ranch if I am worried about you." Clara saw the fear in his eyes and realized this was not about controlling her but about love. "All right, but you have to promise me you will be careful. Promise me you will come for me as soon as it is safe." "I promise," Caleb said, pulling her into his arms. "I love you. Nothing is going to happen to either of us." Caleb took Clara to the Davis Ranch, explaining the situation to Henry and his wife, Martha. They were good people and agreed immediately to shelter Clara. Caleb stayed long enough to make sure she was settled, then rode back to his ranch to prepare for whatever Thornton might have planned. The wait was agonizing for Clara. She tried to keep busy helping Martha with her chores, but her mind was always on Caleb. What if Thornton sent more men? What if there was violence? What if Caleb was hurt or worse? 2 days later, Caleb returned, looking exhausted but unharmed. He had gone to Dodge City, he told Clara, and confronted Thornton directly. He had made it clear that Clara was his wife, that she was happy, and that any further harassment would result in Caleb going to the territorial marshal. He had also reminded Thornton that there were witnesses to the auction. And if Caleb chose to make an issue of it, Thornton's illegal activities could come under scrutiny. Thornton, faced with the possibility of legal trouble, had backed down. He had agreed to leave the Rurks alone, though Caleb suspected it was more about self-preservation than any sense of honor. "It is over," Caleb told Clara as they rode back to the ranch together. "He will not bother us again. Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be." "Thornton is a businessman first. He will not risk his operation for revenge." Clara wanted to believe him, and as the weeks passed with no further incidents, she began to relax. Life returned to normal and she focused on preparing for the baby's arrival. In late August, Clara went into labor. Caleb rode to fetch Martha Davis, who had experience with childbirth. The labor was long and difficult, but Clara was strong, and Martha was skilled. As the sun set on a sweltering summer day, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Caleb held his son with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect." They named the boy Daniel after Caleb's father. He was a good baby, healthy and strong-lunged, with a tuft of dark hair and his father's hazel eyes. Clara had never known such love could exist. Every time she looked at Daniel, every time she saw Caleb holding him and singing to him, her heart felt so full she thought it might burst. The years that followed were full and happy. Daniel grew into a bright, curious toddler, then a sturdy little boy who followed his father everywhere and peppered his mother with endless questions. The ranch prospered, and Caleb was able to hire permanent help, which gave him more time to spend with his family. When Daniel was 3, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Emma, after Caleb's sister. She had Clara's green eyes and Caleb's serious expression, and she was doted on by both her parents and her big brother. Clara also achieved her dream of teaching. A one-room schoolhouse was built about 5 miles from the ranch, and Clara was hired as the teacher. She taught the children of nearby ranches and homesteads, loving every minute of it. Caleb would drop her off in the morning and pick her up in the afternoon, and the children would sometimes come home with her for supper. Life was not without its challenges. There were droughts and harsh winters, illnesses and injuries, the everyday struggles of ranch life. But through it all, Clara and Caleb faced everything together, their love growing deeper with each passing year. One evening, when Daniel was 10 and Emma was 7, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were chasing fireflies in the yard, their laughter ringing out in the gathering dusk. Caleb put his arm around Clara and pulled her close. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked quietly. "The auction?" Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes. It feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to someone else." "Do you have any regrets?" Clara thought about it seriously. "No, as terrible as that night was, it brought me to you. It gave me this life, these children, this happiness. I would not change any of it." "I used to feel guilty," Caleb admitted, "for buying you even though I was trying to help. It felt wrong, like I was participating in something terrible." "You saved me," Clara said firmly. "You gave me a choice when I had none. You gave me freedom and love and a family." "There is nothing to feel guilty about." Caleb kissed the top of her head. "I am the one who was saved. I did not realize how lonely I was until you filled my life with light." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the desperation of that night in Dodge City to the peace and joy of this moment. She had been sold to pay her father's gambling debts. A cowboy had bought her freedom and given her his name. And in doing so, he had given her everything she had ever wanted and so much more than she had ever dreamed possible. Years continued to pass in a gentle rhythm. Daniel grew into a tall, serious young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. He worked alongside Caleb, learning everything about raising cattle and horses, and it was clear he would one day take over the operation. Emma, meanwhile, inherited her mother's love of learning and her father's quiet determination. She was always rating, always asking questions, and Clara suspected she would become a teacher like her mother. When Daniel was 19, he met a young woman named Sarah at a community dance. She was the daughter of a homesteader who had settled in the area a few years earlier. Daniel courted her properly, and Clara and Caleb welcomed her into the family with open arms. The wedding was held at the ranch on a beautiful spring day, and Clara cried happy tears as she watched her son marry the woman he loved. A year later, Daniel and Sarah gave Clara and Caleb their first grandchild, a red-haired baby girl named Rose. Clara held her granddaughter and marveled at the circle of life, at how she had gone from having nothing to having everything. A husband she adored, children who made her proud, and now a grandchild to spoil. Emma eventually went away to study at a teaching college in the East, much to everyone's pride. She returned with new ideas and methods and helped Clara expand the local school. The two of them worked together, mother and daughter, shaping young minds and making a difference in their community. Caleb's limp became more pronounced as he aged, his old injury paining him on cold days, but he never complained. He moved a bit slower but still worked hard, still rode out to check on the cattle, still took pride in the land he had built into a thriving ranch. Clara's hair, once all chestnut, began to show threads of silver. Lines formed at the corners of her eyes from years of smiling. Her hands, already rough from work when Caleb had first met her, were now weathered from decades of labor. But she was happy, deeply and completely happy. One evening, sitting on the porch as they had done countless times over the years, Caleb said, "I want to tell you something I have never told you before." Clara looked at him with curiosity. "What is it?" "That night at the auction, when I bid on you, I had enough money to buy the cattle I needed and have some left over for supplies. But not enough for both. When I bid $5,000 for you, I spent everything I had. I had to borrow money from Henry Davis to buy the cattle I had come for. It took me 2 years to pay him back." Clara stared at him in shock. "You never told me that. You let me think you were wealthy, that $5,000 was nothing to you." "I did not want you to feel guilty, and the money did not matter, you mattered. From the moment I saw you, nothing else mattered." "Oh, Caleb," Clara said, tears filling her eyes, "you gave up everything for me." "And I got everything in return," Caleb said, taking her hand. "I got you and Daniel and Emma and this life we built together. That is worth more than all the money in the world." They sat together as the sun set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and pink. The land stretched out before them, the land they had worked and loved and built their life on. In the distance, they could see Daniel and Sarah's house, where their grandchildren were growing up. Smoke rose from the chimney of Emma's cottage near the school. Everything they had created, everything they loved, was here. Clara thought about the frightened young woman she had been, standing on that platform in Jack Thornton's saloon, believing her life was over. She thought about Caleb, the stranger who had seen her fear and desperation and had chosen to help. She thought about all the years in between, the laughter and tears, the struggles and triumphs, the ordinary moments that had somehow added up to an extraordinary life. "I love you," she said to Caleb, the words she had spoken thousands of times but which never lost their meaning. "I love you too," he replied, squeezing her hand. "Then, now, and always." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara and Caleb remained on the porch, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built a love that would last forever. The cowboy who had bought her freedom and given her his name had given her so much more than that. He had given her hope, dignity, family, and a love that transcended everything. And Clara, who had once been sold like property, had transformed that terrible moment into a beautiful life, proving that even from the darkest beginnings, light could emerge. They would have many more years together, growing old side by side, watching their family expand and flourish. They would face the inevitable sorrows that come with age, the loss of friends and eventually each other. But through it all, they would have the certainty of their love, the knowledge that they had been each other's salvation and greatest joy. And when, many years later, Clara would sit with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren and tell them the story of how she met their grandfather. She would emphasize not the fear and desperation of that night, but the miracle of finding love in the most unexpected place. She would tell them that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best, that redemption is always possible, and that true love, when it comes, transforms everything. The ranch that Caleb had built, that he and Clara had grown together, would remain in the family for generations. The land would see births and deaths, celebrations and sorrows, but always it would be a place of love, a testament to two people who had found each other against all odds and had created something lasting and beautiful. As Clara held Caleb's hand on that porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Kansas sky, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had been sold to pay her father's gambling debts, but a cowboy had bought her freedom and given her his name. And in doing so, he had given her the world. Their story was one of redemption and hope, of two souls finding each other in darkness and creating light together. It was a love story for the ages, proof that even in the harshest circumstances, love could bloom and flourish and last a lifetime. And as the night deepened and the prairie wind whispered through the grass, Clara and Caleb sat together in perfect peace, two halves of a whole, forever bound by the love that had saved them both.